Hey everyone, it's Mahmood and you're listening to Creator Coffee Hour. Today I was joined by the co-founder of ADAE Jewelry, Marwah Abbas. Marwah, alongside her two sisters, officially launched ADAE in November 2020 and have seen great amounts of growth since their start. Their brand is centralized on the core values of diversity and inclusion, minimalism, philanthropy, and accessibility, where they then provide high quality and ethical jewelry pieces at accessible prices. We talked about the process she and her team went through to launch ADAE, analysis paralysis, perfectionism, and taking action, merging your personal values into your work, as well as relying on systems and self-discipline over motivation. If you've been enjoying the episode so far, please leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button if you're listening on Spotify. If you haven't already, subscribe to our direct feed on Substack to receive our episodes before anyone else through the link in our Instagram bio. Now, enjoy the show. Thank you so much, Marwah, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Saul. I'm very excited to be here.
So to people who don't really know you, how would you describe yourself and tell me a bit about your brand ADAE?
Okay, so to, introduce myself to people who don't know me, I'm Marwah, and I'm a recent BBA grad at Wilfrid Laurier University. That's where I met you, Saul. I think third year is where we met. But I did my BBA, so my Bachelor's of Business Administration. I specialized in marketing. I did a minor in Arabic Studies. I also just tried to make the most out of my university career. So in fourth year, I went on exchange. I went to England. I studied business there. I came back. I did co-op while I was at Laurier, and after that, I just recently graduated in 2020, and that kind of transitioned into how ADAE was born. So ADAE Jewelry is the company my sisters and I co-founded and started last year. And from us all being from a business background, we always kind of had an itch into wanting to start our own business, but we didn't really know what. And so we all realized that we were passionate about jewelry and about accessories and fashion, and we saw a gap in the market. Especially in jewelry, it was kind of hard to stay up with the trends and find timeless, minimalistic pieces, either for like a very expensive price, and I would be spending $200 for a chain, or I would just buy it from like a fast fashion shop in the mall, and then it would go green on my fingers or on my neck like a few days later. So we all kind of realized that we had that problem, and when I would talk to my friends, they also did too. So we thought that it was a really good idea to start a brand where we would be able to offer minimalistic and simple jewelry at high quality for accessible prices. And that's really where ADAE was born, by providing a product that we thought was good quality at a good price. But it goes beyond that. Like starting ADAE was about making sure that we had enough creative freedom to really embody our own personalities and values into the brand and make other people also see themselves in the brand. And that's where our values of like diversity, and I know we'll probably touch about this like later in it, but inclusion, minimalism, and philanthropy kind of came into the making of what ADAE is now.
So kind of talk to me about, and you kind of spoke to this, your BBA background, your co-op background, and maybe how some of those co-op experiences maybe contributed to this entrepreneurial itch. Like what's the kind of connection between those two? Because obviously having those experiences and not really diving into that entrepreneurial side of things while you're in university, is that something you always had and you knew while you're going through co-op, or as a result of those co-op experiences did this kind of materialize?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, when I started BBA, like I liked one thing about our program was how in the first couple years they kind of give you a glimpse into everything. So like we were doing accounting and finance and marketing, HR, like everything. So you kind of saw what you liked and didn't like. And then co-op kind of finalized that too, because you were able to actually apply things in real life. So I actually did all three of my co-ops in different fields, which a lot of people think is kind of crazy because they're like, if you know what you like, why don't you continue with the same thing and build your experience? But I think honestly, and as I said, like I wanted to make the most out of my BBA experience. Um, like why not try different things? Because you only have like what other opportunities in life where you have a full-time job for 4 months and then you can just leave it? And if you don't like it, you don't have to go back to it. If you did, like, you know what you like now, right? So there were things that I definitely knew I liked, but also at the same time, other things that I don't know if I would have liked or not. So in my first co-op, I did a placement in marketing communication. So I was more so focused on event and experiential marketing, and I assisted in brand, retail, and digital. So it was like Marcom, which I loved. It was such a great experience for me, and I really found a passion for marketing and being creative. But then in my second co-op, I did HR, which was really out of my field. But I also enjoyed it because I took a lot of things out of it, and we were always on the forefront of like interviewing for jobs and trying to land co-ops. And it was really cool to be on the opposite end, like being in talent acquisition, and just being on the opposite end of seeing how it actually feels to be the interviewer and what you're looking for. Just in that itself gave me a lot of skills that I didn't really know I needed. And then in my last co-op, I did finance, and that was where I wanted to challenge myself because I always thought I wasn't really like a numbers girl per se. Like I can do it. Don't know if I love it, but like I gave it a try and a whole new skill set was born there. It was very analytical, a lot of reporting, but in all three positions, I took so much valuable experience out of it. And I think that did help drive my entrepreneurship because now I knew like different aspects of running like a whole organization. I would say like that helped me in building ADAE, but I think the big push was that in all of these jobs, I it was more than a 9 to 5, I think. And I think others can relate. Maybe you can relate too, Sol, but like the commute, and I know it's normalized and everybody wakes up early in the morning, has to go to work, works their job and comes home, but it's more like a 6 to 7 p.m. job. Like I was waking up at 6 a.m. trying to leave the house before 7 to catch, you know, less traffic, and then getting to work at 8:30, being there until 5, sometimes working overtime, coming home at 7 or 8, and I was just exhausted. I just wanted to go to sleep and then repeat, and all I could think about was work. And as much as I loved my jobs, I I just thought to myself, like, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Like, do I always want to be in corporate and just like working a 9 to 5 office job? And again, I know this is normal for a lot of people, but for me, I was just like, this is exhausting. And I feel like if I could put as much effort as I do into these jobs, why can't I put it in for myself? And another thing I realized, and I wouldn't say this is necessarily just in my co-ops because they did give me a lot of work and per se, but just like speaking to my friends or generally, like when you're in an internship or an entry level position, it can be hard sometimes to get your voice across. And it's either sometimes like one or the other. Either you're given so much work, you're treated like full time, or sometimes you're just treated like, oh, you're new, you're temporary, and like you got to do what you got to do and you got to go. And that makes sense. And for a lot of organizations and corporations, even though they want to embody change, it's hard for them because you're changing so much, or you have such big ideas, but they're used to a certain process. But like, they want to change, but they don't really know how, or they have a way that works for them. And it would be too hard to change so many people or like an idea. And I did notice that a bit. And so sometimes when you have so many ideas as a young person, you could even feel intimidated because you're like, well, I'm just a co-op here. Like, what am I supposed to say? Or like, I could say something, but like, are they going to implement it? It's like a lot to move. So like, why can't I build something on my own where I have like full creative freedom and full say and just see where it goes? And I think that's the thing that a lot of us as BBA students, like we aspire for such big things, but then we think about like imposter syndrome where we're like, oh, well, I can't do that. Like someone else can, or, that's so cool that they did that. But like, I don't think I could. Like, it seems like a lot of work. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just kind of like took the plunge after graduating, also because of the time frame that we graduated in. All the 2020 grads, I'm sure, can relate with me when, like we say, that with COVID, everything was so uncertain and you just had so much time on your own hands because like finding a full time became a lot more difficult, that it was just a perfect opportunity that my sisters and I had to kind of sit down and like actually start something of our own.
So let's dive straight into that then. So what really made you take action? What was a specific trigger point that really pushed you and you're like, okay, this is something that I'm going to do? Kind of speaking to that imposter syndrome like you're mentioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of pushed you beyond that point and being like, I can do this? I don't and it's something that I believe I can do and I can create something great.
Yeah, I think I had in my mind in my last year of school, like what's after this, right? After BBA, like what are my options? Do I want to continue school? Do I want to find a full time? Do I want to start something? Like they were all options in my head. And so I kind of gave thought into each of them. And then I had to also give thought into the situation that I was put in with COVID, because I didn't do my last semester in person. It was online. And then I just graduated after that. Didn't even feel like finishing school because it was just such an awkward transition. There were so many job freezes, even co-op positions that were supposed to be extended, didn't, because of the situation. And there was just time on my hands. So after taking a break and like thinking about it, I was like, why can't I do both? Why can't I look for a full time, but also start something that I've been passionate about, knowing that I kind of I've always wanted to start something. And so I think that also came into play when I was in school, like in second year. My friend and I, we co-founded our own campus club, which is OSP. I hope it's thriving. So you were a part of it, right? In the last year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a lot of work, but it showed me that things are possible, because again, you always think about imposter syndrome, like, oh, I can't do that, or it's so much, but it's a lot of work, and you may not know where to start, but you get there. Like when we started, we had to get a constitution, we had to find people, we had to screen applicants, we had to hire, we had to plan for a budget, we had to apply for so many, like all of these logistic stuff that I just didn't really see coming or know. But like it came, like we put it into action and something came about, and it was one of my biggest accomplishments, I think, out of all of university. As like, even aside from my business accomplishments, I would say building OSP. And it was because I was passionate about the actual project at hand, and it was about supporting orphans and giving back, and it was a good cause, and that's what kept me going for it. So I think after I graduated and I was considering my options, I also sat down with my sisters, and we had always talked about wanting to start something, and together, because we're so close. And my sister, who's a year older than me, Minna, she graduated from Schulich a year before me, so she has a background in business. And my eldest sister, Noor, she also did a minor in business when she graduated. So we all were like, knew we wanted to start something, but like, when was the time to do it, and what were we going to do? And that's when we had the time when like COVID hit, and we were all home, and we were all able to talk about it. And that's where kind of ADAE came about.
So in terms of actually starting, right? You mentioned the
Mhm.
difficulties in starting OSP. What goes on behind the scenes to really start something, right? All the behind the scene works that people don't behind the scenes work that people don't really see, but has to be done in order to start. So what were the greatest difficulties in starting ADAE, in starting this brand?
Um, my sister, when we were talking at one of the Schulich conference that we had like last month, she said analysis paralysis, and it just stuck with me because it rhymes. But she's so right, that that was our biggest difficulty, because we just kept analyzing, and this goes with imposter syndrome too. But basically, you're your biggest critic, and like you will always want things to be perfect. And I don't like to call myself like a perfectionist per se, but when you're launching something and your name is on it, like we always said, we will never put anything out there that like our names aren't, like we're happy our names are on. You know what I mean? Like I don't want anybody coming to me and be like, Marwa, you sold me this or this or this. Like no, like I want to be proud and really like be behind my brand. And so with us, our biggest challenge was over analyzing everything, all the little details. And I think that was a problem, because if you keep doing that, you'll never actually launch, you'll never actually start. And so that's why we had to set a deadline. My mom actually gave us the deadline. She's like, I want you to launch by my birthday. It has to go up. And so then we had that on the calendar. And that's what pushed us, because we were like, no, we have to have it up and running by this date. And so the few weeks like leading up to the launch was just like 14-hour work days. Like it was a lot. But we just we just kept looking into it, and we're just like, oh, but this doesn't look like this isn't. But one thing that we realized, and especially after starting, that I would give advice to people who want to start a business, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be close to perfect, because brands change all the time, and things don't have to be the same. Like it can develop, it can grow, it can move forward, it can be different, and you can even have your customers engaged in that process of building your brand. There's like huge billion-dollar companies, Pepsi, Coke, like they've changed and evolved so much over time. They didn't have like the perfect product and position like at the beginning. It was a huge process. And so I think that's one thing that was a challenge for us, because like even the website, I was like, this is all people are going to see. Is it nice? Is it not? Like there's like one little coding error here, like things like that would just set me back. But there will always be problems you don't foresee, but you just kind of have to get over it. You just have to know that that's like going to come with it, but like you just keep pushing. So I think launching and like putting in the action then don't like overanalyze everything, would be like what was our biggest challenge and something that I would advise against for others.
And I think that's a common theme that we see across a lot of the people that I've talked to so far, where inaction, in fact, is your worst enemy, because you might have all these big ideas. If you're in the cycle of constantly preparing, there's a chance you won't ever actually make action and actually do it, because you think, you have to. A lot of people are perfectionists. Like perfectionism, I think, especially across BBAs, like I think the fact is, like, sometimes it's passed into us, like kind of like through the academic side of things, where we always have to get 12s, we always have to do the best of the best possible, that kind of thing. And then that may translate to the entrepreneurial side of things. Like if someone wants to launch something, then they're constantly preparing and thinking about how to make it perfect. But the fact is, yeah, like you said, it will never be perfect. And brands like PepsiCo, brands like Apple, Microsoft, the biggest companies in the world, they're constantly changing. Their products are changing, their marketing's changing.
Exactly. And we forget that. It's so easy to forget that because like you have a vision or something that you want and you don't see it like happening, like you just push it aside, but you just have to be able to just be like, no, we just have to, launch. I don't know. That was our thing. And I think a lot of people struggle with that as well.
So starting out, what resources did you use? How did you learn about the marketplace? That's the first kind of thing. How did you learn about the marketplace? How did you find the certain products that you wanted to sell? And even like product quality, like especially with jewelry, because that's so important. You mentioned to that. Analyzing product quality, like how did you go through that kind of process, especially as someone who's not specialized as someone in the, I would say in the jewelry industry, like you're a business student. How did you kind of go through that analysis process?
A lot of research. So I would say it was very helpful that we all had business backgrounds, but again, it's very different because in university you learn a lot of theory, and then in real life it's obviously application, and application is always a lot different than the theory you learn. So that's where co-op kind of came into play, of like actually learning how business operates or like an organization in general. But yeah, starting your own thing, it's not easy. There's a lot of steps where you're like, oh, well, what do I do from like a legal standpoint, from, logistics to operating, like there's a lot of to go through. So it was a lot of research on all of our parts. And a good thing is that we all have different skill sets. So we took on like different areas of an organization and how we would build it. Well, our thought was, I would say that our biggest research was obviously Google. Like you can Google a lot of things and look up a lot of things, but also looking into different small business owners. We had a few friends that started their own small businesses. So they were a big help to us in just like learning about some of like logistics or helping with packaging or whatnot. Also, TikTok is a huge resource. Huge. I love TikTok. Okay. Go follow us on there, guys, at ADAE Jewelry. Anyways, so many small business tips on there that are under a minute long. You can find so many other Canadian small business owners that are willing to help you, and so many tips and tricks and things that you would have never like found online, but they're there and people are just willing to give the information for free. And so that was huge. And once the algorithm on TikTok is crazy, because like once you like a couple, like your whole For You page is like small business TikTok. And that really, really helped a lot. Obviously, I would say in starting, like you want to talk to an accountant and this and that in terms of sourcing. That was probably one of the harder things that we had to overcome, because again, our product was so important for us to reach um, a certain quality and live up to our standards before we could just start selling it. So that was a whole process in itself before launch, of course, because it was about finding products, finding suppliers, and we had to deal with a lot of different manufacturers and different suppliers, give them product designs, metal designs. A lot of research went into jewelry itself and metals and grading and whatnot, what you should be looking for, and then the testing process itself. So we contacted a bunch of different suppliers. We had designs, we had outlines, we had metal requests, we had a lot. And you might think it's easy, like, okay, you could find one manufacturer and give them all the information they need so that you'll get what you want. But it's not as easy. They're not all great. You have to have good communication with them. You have to like actually sample the products, get them to send you samples. Always get samples, guys, always, because that can be a big issue. And then you test the products. So we wore all of our jewelry for months before we like approved it to be in our line and in our collection. And yeah, so it was difficult, but it's doable, and that's another thing. I think Laurier or just BBA or the courses I specifically took, I didn't take any electives regarding or relating to supply chain, which I kind of wish I did. But we didn't learn too much about that process. But yeah, it is a process, and a lot of things are challenging, and not just with the product itself, but even with packaging. So I kid you not, like I think us figuring out packaging took us like a month, and I used to dream of packaging because it stressed me out so much because like it was huge for us because I thought like we really said that packaging would be a huge aspect into our brand, and also like just the realistic way of how to package jewelry. But then also like in terms of logistics and dimensions and shipping to customers and weight and all of the stuff coming to play with design. Oh my gosh, I did not think that was going to be as big as a problem as it was. And it took us over a month to like finalize enough for the launch. Again, another thing that, we just kept like on before we were like, oh, but is it ready? But is it enough? Is this how we want to do it? Is this how we want? Again, we just had to go with it, which I'm happy with how it turned out. So I'm not saying like it wasn't, but I would dream because I would work on that at night and like be drawing up designs and stuff. And then when I'm stressed about things, especially before when I'm like working on them before bed, they're in my dreams. And I would wake up thinking about like box ideas. So it's a little embarrassing, but it's true. Like it's a lot.
Life of an entrepreneur, life of a small
Oh my
brand
God,
owner.
yes. Yes, it is a lot of work, but it's worth it. If you like what you're doing or you like your product or you believe in what you're doing, then it's 100% worth it.
So I would say 2020 was the year of e-commerce,
Hmm.
and a lot of major news outlets have covered this. You'll see the shift to e-commerce in 2020 was massive. Was
Hmm.
massive, right? But as kind of things kind of come, I would say they're not going to level out. Obviously, e-commerce will continue to dominate, but as the market gets more and more competitive, especially from a marketing standpoint, how do you kind of go do the research and to maintain that you're putting out what your brand values and you're putting out your product and differentiating yourself versus other competitors in the marketplace, especially as e-commerce continues to grow and get more competitive.
How do we differentiate ourselves
Well,
from
yeah,
like?
like from a marketing standpoint, because I think
Hmm. Hmm.
one thing that I like kind of from my side of things is that if you look at, for example, like Facebook ads, Google ads, right?
Hmm.
They'll continue to get more and more expensive, right? And then they have like
Yes.
over the last year,
Hmm.
because of the demand, right? So
Hmm.
how do you kind of approach, I guess, marketing to make sure that you're getting a good mix in terms of like, for every ad dollar you spend, you're getting the value that you kind of desire. Like, how do you kind of balance that? I guess that's what my question is.
In terms of marketing, I think it has to do with, I think that what sets us different first from competitors is with ADAE, we wanted people to see themselves in their jewelry. And this goes back to the diversity and inclusion thing and how big that was for us. Because growing up, especially as biracial individuals who are a minority, both religiously and through race, we didn't really see much representation of ourselves. And again, as you said, in 2020, it was huge. There was a whole movement too, and a lot of people started to like a lot of big brands started, I guess, to include more diversity in their campaigns, um, which is a good thing. It's nice to see people that kind of look like you in it. But it's like about time. You know what I mean? Like you haven't been doing this for so many years, and it's about time. With ADAE, like we wanted it to be like us, like our values and who we are in the brand, and people can relate with that and resonate because we're everyday people too. And so even just in terms of branding, like all of our models, everybody on the website, on our Instagram, they're friends. They're friends that are of all different backgrounds, all different races. They're everyday people. They see themselves in the jewelry. They are like your everyday person as well. And then on our Instagram page as well, it's customers even who just send in their photos of them wearing it, and we post, and you see like it's about spreading the love of just including diversity and inclusion. Even our like collection, like we named each piece after a friend or family member that has supported us, and that's a huge thing too, because it's just very nice to surprise somebody and be like, thank you so much for the support. This necklace is named after you, and they have a whole collection piece, and we continue with that. And so our whole brand was about like having, I don't know, a piece of us into it. And in terms of philanthropy was a huge value for us too. We launched the World Collection, which has two necklaces in it right now, which is the Wanderer necklace, it's a world necklace, and the Africa continent map necklace. And 10% of proceeds go to Muslims around the world, which is the Orphan Project. Again, a huge thing that was kind of related to us because we grew up, well, we're half North African. So, in that sense, the project does support orphanages within Africa. So, that was nice to give back to our own community in that sense. But also, it was an orphan project, and we grew up, our grandfather owned an orphanage in South America. So, our whole kind of like, um, um, I guess, charity aspect, we've always had like a kick for like that type of endeavor because we grew up with it, and just seeing it in the family tradition. So it's like little things like that that really push today to like the brand it is right now. Um, and in terms of marketing and showcasing that, I think something that we aimed for was, instead of spending so many ad dollars in terms of like, Facebook ads and Google ads, we focused more on social media, which is a bit more free, and just pumping out good content, instead of like spending money on ads. Like we do, but not as much as, especially when you're starting up. It can be hard to find the budget to allocate to spending ad dollars and then seeing like results. Whereas I think at the beginning, just getting like local engagement, even family and friends, and then word of mouth, and then having good content on social media can help you grow. So TikTok was huge for us. Like right now, I think we're reaching 5,000 followers. So again, go follow us. Also on Instagram, guys, please follow us on Instagram. Here's my plug for that. ADAE Jewelry, we're almost at 1,000. And once we hit 1,000, we'll be doing a giveaway. So very interesting, very fun. And yeah, so I think that's kind of what set us apart from competitors. We're not just a big brand. We're also not a fast fashion brand. We're like somewhere in the middle, just a small business trying to offer you guys good products and really put ourselves into it as well.
I love the role that diversity, inclusion, philanthropy, charity plays not only just in your life, I would say, but how that translates to the work you're doing entrepreneurially as well. Because you can also tell like how much it means not only to you but to your sisters, and how it's translated into the brand. And that's one of the things that I really, really, really do like about the work you've done, and the brand as well.
Thank you.
So succeeding in your current, because now you're working at KPMG in consulting. Consulting does require longer hours sometimes, and have you managed to succeed in your current role, and then working on a day after hours? Like, how do you find that balance? Because I feel like they may be very highly demanding. And what would you say, and what would you recommend to people in the same position as you, like who want to have that side hustle and create something new while continuing to work on the side?
Okay, my advice is prioritization is key, fundamental, key, very key. In terms of personally, like I actually think I'm kind of lucky because it's not just me. There's 3 of us running it. We all have full-time jobs, so it's like a lot. But I would say before starting ADAE, it was like a full-time job on its own. Starting a business is like the most amount of work. And at that time, I had just graduated. I was like free to, spend that time. That's where I think it would have been really difficult for me to be balancing both. After the launch date, we kind of like, we're kind of used to the process of how it was operating. And so after getting the job then, it was able for, and since we all have full-time jobs that are, your standard 9 to 5 or whatever, Monday to Friday, we all have our weekends off and then evenings off. So then it was about, setting meetings that worked for us at good times, making sure that we're proactive about getting things done, and just writing out what needs to be done. So we will all of our meetings just consist of like our goals for the week, goals for the month, what we want done by this, pre-planning content together, like organizing everything that we needed in a matter that we'll just have to post and go. You know what I mean? It's not like what do I have to post something now, like what do I do? So everything is like pre-planned to do, and like on a monthly basis, but also on a weekly basis, so that we're able to do what we need to do for a day at the same time as do our jobs. But yeah, there was something else I wanted to say about this, but now I can't even remember. What was the beginning of your?
Well, I guess succeeding in both roles, but also someone who might be in a similar position to what you were now. Like you said, prioritization, but what are the other things that you would recommend?
I've been I'm an agenda person. So both online and offline, I have a calendar and my agenda that literally, this might seem a bit excessive, but it really helps, especially if you're busy or you have a lot going on, to outline your day hour by hour of what you need to get done. So like if I have different tasks or things that I need to get done, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I'll do that from 10 to 12. I should have like this much done. And then like I kind of know like where things need to be or how they're laid out in terms of work, and then also a day at the same time because they're both my jobs now. And so like when I schedule it in like that, I can clearly see, and I don't like underestimate or overestimate like my time frames, and then that way I'm really able to make the most out of my 24-hour days, and then also include my social life in there as well and balance your schedule out. Because when you just think like, oh, I have this and this and this and this to do, it becomes so stressful because you're like, oh my god, I don't know, like where's the time to do it all. But when you really plan it out, you can like, it's so satisfying checking it off. And then if you don't get it done, you're like, all right, well then I'll just like slot it in here or like whatever. And I think that's another thing about being your own boss. It's like a blessing and a curse. More a blessing. It's not really a curse. It depends how you are. But like you can like, it's really nice working for yourself and putting in your hard work for yourself and seeing it, come to life. But at the same time, it's easy to be like, I don't really feel like doing that. And who's going to tell you no? Like you're telling yourself you don't want to do it. And it's fine because things can be discouraging, and along the way there's always going to be problems that are thrown at you that you just didn't see, and you're like, oh my god, I can't deal with that. I don't know. And then you just like you just push it to the side, and I've done that a few times. I'm like, I just can't deal with the stress, like whatever. But one thing I read somewhere, which is so true, is that you're not always going to be motivated, so you have to learn how to be self-disciplined. And that's very true because you won't be motivated. Sometimes things will happen and you're just over it. But because it's yourself, it is a job. Treat it like it's a 9 to 5. You're working for a corporation. You have a job to do. You need to get it done. You have to be self-disciplined to say, like, listen, if I don't do, who will? Like, I'm my own employee. So you have to boss yourself. But it's something that I had to learn, and a big advice tip that I would give out to any entrepreneur who wants to start something.
Self-discipline, environment management, those are all things that are more powerful than motivation. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not motivated enough. I can't do that. I'm not motivated." They put all the onus on motivation, but stuff like discipline and having systems in place so that that stuff gets done is much more powerful than motivation, because motivation comes in peaks and dips, right? But if you have systems in place and a certain level of self-discipline, then those things will get done regardless. So I want to jump into working with your sisters, as a co-founding trio. You spoke to this already. Can we dive a bit into like the dynamic and how your kind of skills kind of support one another?
Yeah. I'm really blessed to have sisters that we grew up very close together, and so working with them has not really been like, it's been really nice, to be honest. Not many problems. Obviously, sisterly fights, but that's normal in everyday life even. Um, but yeah, we all have different skill sets. So as I said, like previously, like we all have a business background, so it's been good. But also in just general, we have very different skill sets of what we're good at and what we like doing. And so it was easy to allocate different parts of the business to the three of us because like the art stuff or the design or like, arts and craft stuff or like packaging design, like went to my eldest sister. Like that's her forte. She's the art girl from us. And she's more on like logistics and she likes numbers and stuff. More marketing forefront, that was more my specialization. Minna also like to help play a big role in that. I had a bit of experience in HTML and CSS. So when it came to building the website, I like was happy to take that on because I actually enjoy and I had experience building websites. So like in that type of way, it worked out pretty perfectly for us because we were able to divide the workload pretty evenly amongst ourselves, but we also have like overlapping preferences as well so that we would help each other out wherever we need. In terms of, I know like people say like working with family, that could be tough. And it's true, it could be, but I guess we are lucky, blessed, I guess, because also I find that sometimes when you work with other people, like you don't want to say something because you want to spare feelings or you feel a different way and you just you don't want to butt heads too much, and you want to be courteous to how you act. When it's family, it's like unconditional love. So you could say anything, like we roast each other, like, no, that's ugly. No, I don't like it. I just don't. And we don't take it personally because we're all just like, okay, all right, whatever, next. And we know how we are, like, and our personalities and how we operate. So it's worked in our favor because on the most part, we agree on most things. When we see differently, we're able to express that easily. And we go from there. So
where do you see yourself in your entrepreneurial journey? Is my question.
that's a big
Yeah,
question.
no, like, but basically what I'm saying is that I would say even OSP, like you can say that was kind of entrepreneurial, right? You were starting something totally brand new and you had to like create it and go through all the logistical processes to create a brand new club on campus, right? And I have this discussion a lot where people often say sometimes that, oh, a small business isn't entrepreneurial. And I completely disagree. I think creating anything new, starting from scratch, like inherently that is entrepreneurial. Like just because you aren't going to get venture funding or you aren't applying for grants and stuff like that, or you didn't take entrepreneur classes at business school, that doesn't mean that you're not entrepreneurial. Like, but sometimes there is that from some people that I've spoken to, there is that kind of mentality.
But also off of that too, like I think it's like very broad to say you're an entrepreneur or you're entrepreneurial. People always have like different opinions. Like as you said, they might be like, oh, a small business owner, that's not very entrepreneurial. But then also there's like the other side of the stereotype that if you're an entrepreneur, that just is another word for being unemployed, right? Like you hear that too. So it's just like whatever, people are always going to talk. But as long as you like, what does entrepreneurial really mean? I guess there's a lot of different definitions, but if, again, as you said, even starting OSP, right, you're taking an idea and you're bringing it to life. I think that in itself is entrepreneurial.
So starting off in university, like going into first year, do you see yourself making this step and going towards this kind of entrepreneurial journey? Like, was this something that you're kind of always working towards, or was this something that kind of started and you think like this is now like the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey now?
Honestly, yes and no. So to be honest, like my whole elementary and high school career, I always thought I was going to go into science and healthcare. So it was like different when I actually went into business. I never really saw that for myself in general. And then I was in business school, so I was just seeing how it was. I always had the idea that like I think I could be a good leader. I always thought I could start something by myself. Like I believed in myself in that regard, but I never thought like, oh, one day I want to run a small business, or one day I want to be a business owner, or one day I want to do this. I don't really know. I just kind of took it as life came as to like where I would be. And I think in university, it was a lot of just figuring out what I want to do. And I still am kind of figuring out what I want to do. There's so much pressure, especially like from high school, like, oh, you have to pick a program. What do you want to be? What do you want to go into? But it's okay to figure it out along the way and kind of see. It's just like what you like doing. And I always knew that I had like a spirit that I think could transfer into leadership in some sort, but I didn't necessarily know how. So I think within being in BBA kind of pushed me into like thinking more about being an entrepreneur or starting something myself for real, given like the skills that I was learning and the program I was in. But if you asked me like last year or the year before, like, do you see like, oh, you're going to be running your own jewelry business? Like, I would have never guessed. I would have been like, I don't know about that. And I think like, I always think that too. Like, I think back, like, if I knew this like a year or two ago, like, what would I think? And that goes for so many of my positions. Like when I worked at in finance, like if you asked me a year before, like, oh, Mario, your next club's going to be in finance, I'd be like, oh, no, it's not. But it was. And I did something different. Even like my first co-op, I was at Dragon's Den, like my second week in there, and I met the dragons and I was watching the live taping. I would have never thought that that was like possible for me at like my young 19-year-old self, like I felt like I was doing big things. And yeah, I just never knew. Again, even with COVID, right? If you told me a year ago, like you'd be in a pandemic, your last semester would be online, everything would shut down, the whole world, you can't travel, I'd be like, no, I don't believe you. Like that, like the world can't just shut down. But it did. So yeah, I don't know. You never really know where life takes you. I feel like in the next year, who knows where any of us will really be. So Yeah.
So how do you find that balance between taking things as they come and planning?
Okay, I think that's where religion kind of plays into it, like being a person of faith. It's a stressful period when you're graduating because it's like, okay, now what? Right? And what job do I want? What career do I want to pursue? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? And so many people get so stressed. And obviously, I incurred a bit of that stress as well. But that's where, like, you come back to, I don't know, for me, I go back to my faith. And so what I've learned in like being Muslim and stuff is that, whatever is meant for you is meant for you. It's written, and whatever is supposed to come to you will come to you. Like when I see somebody else's success, I never think, oh, I wish that was me. Oh, that could have been me. Like I'm happy for that person because that was what's meant for them. And in whatever ways supposed to come to me will come to me. So like job opportunities, obviously, if I'm seeking them out or I'm applying, like I'm trying hard to get a job, but I know that like, there's destiny. You put your faith in God, whatever comes, it will be for you. And if a job doesn't come or you don't get it, like that's okay too. That means that one wasn't for you. And when you have that mindset, you're never really jealous of another individual and what they have. You're never really thinking about like other people's success versus your own or comparing, because you really have and like content with the idea that like destiny is there, and that, like whatever, you work hard and you see where it takes you. And that's where you're able to live day by day, kind of a bit more stress free, because you're not putting the faith completely in yourself and only yourself, but also in God. And that's like how I balance myself, I guess, in a day to day. And everybody's different, and everybody has like different ways to cope or deal with things. But in that sense of just like bringing myself back to reality, we don't have a lot of control over many things in life. Like getting a job, you don't have a really control if you're going to get it or not, but you try your best and you just go from there.
I love that. Kind of delving into that a bit more. Being a person of color,
Mm-hmm.
being, a visible minority, how do you kind of deal with kind of the difficulties that come with that? And of course, we're all working from home now, and there's maybe less like, let's say dealing with suppliers in person and stuff like that. But,
Mm-hmm.
business relationships, like how do you kind of deal with that, as a minority, as a person of color, and how do you kind of like ensure that you have that level of credibility?
As I was saying like earlier, like when you work for a large organizations, it's hard to make change, especially as you said, like if you're young, it's a bit harder because like you're new and you're young, like you just came in here and you want to make so many changes, hard to do. When you start your own thing, you're in control of like your own creative freedom of what you want to do with that. In terms of like business relations, one thing that I always thought too is like in interviews, it's not just an interview for the employer, to say, oh, like I want you and to hire you. It's an interview also for the person applying for the job if they want to work there. So I've always taken my interviews like, is this a place I actually want to work for? Is this a place like I want to like spend my 40 hours a week with these people, with this organization, like with the company values? Like I had like for me, as I said, philanthropy and charity is like a huge thing to me because I think it's really important to give back. Not everything is about, profit and money or whatnot. And I was in this job interview and I asked this guy, like their organization was partnered with sick kids. And I was asking him like what the relationship is like, or as an employee, how could you get involved? And he didn't even know they were partnered with sick kids. And it kind of just spoke for like the organization. And like, I guess it's not like a huge thing amongst just the employees. Maybe it's just like, I don't know. Anyway, so it kind of spoke to me like this is probably not the place I want to go. And also that goes with the thing with like wearing the hijab and being a visible minority, like you get a sense of like how people treat you or react to you. And it goes back to like even the resume thing. Um, like, there's like a whole thing of whitewashing your resume or changing your name or this or that or whatever. And I've heard it before. Okay, it's it's sad because people are like, oh well, if you wear hijab, like these opportunities won't be as open for you, like being a visible Muslim, it might not be as open. And it's sad that I've heard it from people that I know and also from potential employers that if you take your hijab off, then you can get the job. Or like, I don't want to put hijab on because opportunities will be closed for me, and that's a common conception. I wouldn't say it's even a misconception because that might be true to some extent, um, But at the end of the day, hijab is part of my identity, and I don't want to work for anybody that doesn't acknowledge or respect me being a Muslim and who I am. So what's the point? I'm not going to put my effort and my time into that. So for me, that's my standpoint on it. Like, if you don't want me, that's fine. I don't want you either. I don't see them as missed opportunities, because whatever, that's not an opportunity for me to begin with. It's not something I'd want. But I understand sometimes it's difficult for people when they see it in that light. And so I don't know. For me personally, I just try to surround myself with an environment, and even with business partners, people that actually respect me, and that, there's mutual respect. I never feel put down. Otherwise, not worth my time of day. It's harder said than done, though. Like, I'm saying it like, oh, whatever, but that's how I've built myself to be. Otherwise, a lot of situations in life would have put me down so much that I would stop believing in myself,
And I think you've grown a lot, right? Like those difficulties have kind of also probably shaped your resiliency in approaching things like creating a new business and building the brand, right? Like there's a certain level of resiliency that comes from,
Yeah.
when you suffer those different types of things, and
Well, honestly, I know this is kind of like besides the point, but I started wearing my hijab when I was like younger. And my first job interview, which was at a fast food restaurant, I won't name names. So I was so excited. I was what, 15, 14, 15, 15. And I got this call back the next day, and I was on the phone with this lady, right? And she was like, oh, she was already telling me about my schedule. And she was like, yeah, you can work from this time to this time. I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, yeah, why don't you come in? Can you come in tonight? Like, I could give you your uniform. We could talk scheduling more. We could blah, blah, blah. So I basically got this job over the phone, and I was so excited. And I told my mom, and she dropped me to the store, whatever. I went in, and the first thing this lady said to me was, oh, you wear that thing on your head? And the whole thing, like, my mood, everything was just, I just was so shocked, because it was my first job interview, and I thought I got the job. And then that was literally the words that came out of her mouth. And I was like, yeah, what about it? And then she just proceeded to tell me how I couldn't do the job. I couldn't wear the hat if I wore this on my head, how maybe I'd be better in the back than being like a cashier, like not be seen. And I was like, what? Like, I was speechless. Honestly, usually, like, I have a mouth now. Like, I would have said something back. But then I was just so shook, like, that this is the stuff that you saying to me so blatantly. And then I kind of got discouraged from applying to other places. I'm like, I'm just going to go, and they're going to see me and be like, oh, this Muslim girl or something, like, it was in my head because of that experience. So I think from just a young age, like, I just was like, no, like, that can't bother me. I'm not going to let it bother me. And so from then on, it made me have tougher skin.
No, that's awful. That is.
Yeah, but it's okay. We grew
It
from
grew
it.
from it, exactly.
So that's all that matters.
I think one last thing that I'd want to ask you is, and you've touched on a lot of things that already apply to this, but I think it would be great if we can just be more direct on it. Is for people who, again, have maybe even kind of have went through the co-op program, or who are maybe even working full time, but have always had this itch, this entrepreneurial itch to do something.
Mm-hmm.
If you have two things to tell them to really take that step and take action like you did, what would those two pieces of advice be?
That's a good question. I think my first piece of advice is find something that you're passionate about, whatever it may be, because you can enter doing a small business in so many different ways. Like, it doesn't have to be e-commerce. And this is something that I wanted to talk to you about too, because like, we went about building a brand, but I remember you were telling me that you did drop shipping in the past. And that is something that is still like a side hustle, a small business, something that could lead you into a different aspect of entrepreneurship, or even running just an Instagram business where you sell things and deliver them yourselves, or a physical store. Like, it doesn't matter. If you have any type of idea, right, that's where you need to start with pursuing it. So if you are passionate about something, that's where the next step would be to just think about different ways you could execute it. So again, maybe you'd be like, oh, maybe I could do this through e-commerce. Maybe I could find shelf space in a small store. Maybe I could run this through just Instagram, or Etsy, or you know what I mean? Like there's so many different avenues to starting out. And then after that, weigh your pros and cons. What is realistic in terms of your time frame and the amount of time and capital you have to put towards it. And this could be a whole podcast in itself, I guess. But then from there on, once you lay out some sort of blueprint or groundwork, then you could be able to actually put it into action and see like the necessary help you would need for it, or how much money are you willing to spend on it. Once you like plan just the little things out, then you'll be able to kickstart yourself.
Like for someone who's still searching for that passion, what would you say?
I would say start doing research into different methods. Okay, I can only speak really for e-commerce at the moment because that's what I went into. But I did kind of think about dropshipping before we even started today, like way before, because I was just thinking about different ways to enter that market, because everything being digital, with COVID, everyone's online shopping, how to get on there. So I just did research. Again, TikTok, huge. Just start following some small business accounts, follow us, get some small business tips, and that pushes you, like it motivates you because you see so many people doing it. You think like, oh, starting a business so hard, but so many people are doing it and there's ways to do it, and you're like, it makes it seem less intimidating because you're getting the information, and that could just like come on your For You page or whatever, right? And like you just start seeing ideas and what different people are selling and different ways they're doing it, and then from there. So I would just say like on your socials or just anywhere that you get your news or something, like add things to it that are small business related so that you get ideas.
Finding a balance between all the different types of marketing, whether it be advertising, content marketing, email marketing. You said starting out like social media is definitely, social media content marketing is definitely your focus.
Forte. Yes.
How much thought have you put it into, for example, like email marketing or starting and more like SEO types of things, like starting a blog, speaking more about fashion and jewelry and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to even the question that you asked about things that you learn in the brand versus school, like SEO. I don't think that was really ever touched about or touched on during school as much. And that was something that, even with my experience building websites in the past, it was more of just like building it and not about actually like getting visibility for it. So SEO is a huge thing. That was a learning curve for me to like start to learn into, but also very good experience even for full-time jobs. If I apply to other places now, I have a bit more information on how that works. But yeah, as you said, it's like, there's a lot of things that come in terms of marketing that you really need to like be on. Marketing is huge in building a brand because that's what you're selling. You're selling the brand, like obviously the product, but like how do you position that product to customers? So yes, SEO is something that I had to learn. Things like that I've learned through YouTube videos and like courses, like how Google has a lot of certificates and courses that you can take, like Google Analytics and stuff like that to track your sales. And like with Facebook ads, we've all divided up different like points. So my sister's in charge of like Facebook and Instagram ads, thank the Lord. But yeah, it's a lot to learn, and it's a lot. Like in terms of blog work, that is something that we're working on and thinking of developing some sort of fashion or style guide that goes on. Email marketing, I am in charge of. And I honestly should have more emails out than I do. I need to like put together, but it's all in the plans, like future, we're growing steadily. We have a lot of plans still waiting to come into action. But again, it's also a thing is like, it's about balance. Don't overwork yourself, right? Especially when you are working like multiple jobs, but having a plan. And that's like where our meetings go into like what we want to have done and like what we see happening and how to grow and continue. And email marketing is huge. That's something that I wish that we got into more pre-launch, because again, I think we were so focused on like, when we launch the brand, this is what we want people to see. But I think it's equally as important to start your business before you even start it, because then you can engage people and engage customers and grow an email marketing list before you even launch. And that's something that is advice to people, because if we went back, that's something I would change.
Awesome though, Marwah. I'm so excited to
Awesome, Saul.
I'm so excited to see, what's in store for you in a day into
Thank
the future
you.
too, because I can tell.
For you too. I'm excited for this podcast. I'm glad to be like one of the first guests. Look at
Yeah,
that.
and I think you can tell, like, I don't know if you know the other guests that I've had on so far, but I'm happy to get like all different types of kind of entrepreneurial journeys covered on this podcast. 'Cause I think that's the most important thing, showing people that there's so many different ways that you can kind of start something on your own, no matter what your initial path may be. If anyone wants to reach out to learn more about you and your story and ADAE, where can they find you and the brand?
Oh, you can find us guys at ADAE Jewelry on pretty much every platform. So adaejewelry.com for the website if you want to shop, ADAE Jewelry on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and Twitter. And reach out to us. Even if you have just business questions or you want to start something, feel free to reach out to us. I would say like our Instagram, please, because we are almost at 1,000. But on TikTok, we do give out small business tips as well. And a lot of people have connected with us from there, and you meet a lot of other small business owners. We've had some really good Zoom discussions with people, and it's just nice about sharing information and networking and, helping each other out. So yeah, that's where they can find us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Marwah.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Creator Coffee Hour. It was really great hearing about Marwah's journey in launching ADAE, and I personally learned a lot from her story, so I hope you did as well. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Creator Coffee Hour for weekly updates and some awesome content. And to receive our episodes the instant they're released, subscribe to our Substack through the link in our Instagram bio, where you can subscribe to the email feed. Thanks again for listening. See you all next week.